My cruel aunt slammed the door in my face on Christmas, thinking she was just rejecting her failure of a niece. She didn't know she had just slammed the door on her family's only hope for survival and the powerful investor I had brought with me to save them all. The polished leather of the passenger seat felt impossibly smooth beneath my trembling hands. Beside me, in the quiet, opulent interior of his Bentley, sat Mr. Blackwood, a man who could buy and sell entire city blocks without a second thought. And in my briefcase, resting on my lap like a ticking time bomb, was a multi-million-dollar investment proposal, a lifeline that I, his newest and most unproven project manager, had somehow convinced him to extend to my family's dying company. I was driving toward my childhood home for Christmas dinner, not just as Sophie, the family scapegoat, but as a secret savior. They thought I was a failure. They had no idea I was their last and only hope. And as we turned onto my aunt's familiar, brightly decorated street, a cold dread began to settle in my stomach. I knew Mr. Blackwood, but I also knew my Aunt Patty. "You're quiet, Sophie," Mr. Blackwood observed, his voice a calm, reassuring baritone that was so at odds with the frantic beating of my own heart. "Second thoughts?" "Something like that, sir," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. My family can be complicated. I appreciate you doing this more than you know, coming here tonight on Christmas to meet them personally." "Nonsense," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "I like to know who I'm getting into business with. And besides, I'm not investing in your family's construction company, Sophie. Not really. I've seen their books. The business is a dinosaur, poorly managed and leveraged to the hilt. It's on the verge of collapse." He turned to look at me, his eyes sharp and analytical, the same look he'd given me when I first pitched him the idea. "I'm investing in you. You have a brilliant mind for logistics and a vision for how to modernize that company. This isn't a lifeline for them. It's your first major project as the head of my new development division. If you succeed, you'll have proven me right. If you fail, well, let's not consider that." The weight of his words settled on me. This was more than just saving my father's life's work. It was the launching point of my entire career. I had worked so hard to get here, to claw my way out from under the shadow of my family's low expectations. My aunt, Patricia, had been the self-appointed arbiter of my worth for my entire life. To her, I was flighty Sophie, unreliable Sophie, the one who had pursued a useless art history degree instead of a practical business one like her own children. She had made it her life's mission to remind me, and everyone else, of my perceived inadequacies at every family gathering. Every Christmas, every Thanksgiving was a fresh trial, a new opportunity for her to land a cutting remark disguised as a joke, a passive-aggressive jab cloaked in concern. And yet here I was, driving to her house on Christmas evening, holding the key to her husband's and my own father's financial salvation. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. "My father and my uncle run the company together," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady and professional. "My dad is the heart of the operation, the old-school builder. My uncle, he is my Aunt Patty's husband. She's the one you'll need to watch out for. She can be difficult."
"I've dealt with difficult people before, Sophie," Mr. Blackwood said with a thin smile. "The key is to never let them know you think they're difficult." We pulled onto her street, a quiet suburban lane lined with houses, twinkling with festive lights. Every house looked warm, inviting. Every house but one. As I approached my aunt's colonial-style home, my stomach tightened into a cold, hard knot. I could see the silhouettes of my family moving through the brightly lit windows. I could hear the faint sound of music and laughter spilling out into the cold night air. They were all in there, happy, celebrating, and I was on the outside, a supplicant, bringing an offering they didn't even know they needed. "Let's park down the street," I suggested. "It's probably better if I go in first, smooth the way a little. I'll introduce the idea and then I can come and get you." Mr. Blackwood nodded, understanding the delicate politics of the situation immediately. Why strategy? Take your time." He pulled the car to the curb about 100 feet from the house. I took a deep breath, grabbed my briefcase, and stepped out into the crisp, cold air. The walk from the car to that front door was one of the longest of my life. The crunch of the thin layer of snow under my boots sounded unnaturally loud in the quiet night. With every step, a silent, desperate prayer looped in my mind. Please let her be nice, just for tonight. Please, just this once. Let her see that I'm trying to help. Let this be the Christmas it all changes. I was giving her one last chance to see me as family, not as a disappointment. I reached the front porch, its steps illuminated by a cheerful, glowing Santa Claus. I could see them all through the large bay window now, gathered in the living room, their faces animated and joyful. I saw my father, looking tired but happy. I saw my cousins, my uncle, my own mother, and I saw Aunt Patty, holding a glass of wine, laughing at something someone had said. My heart ached with a desperate desire to be a part of that warmth, that easy belonging. I raised my hand, my knuckles cold, and rang the doorbell. The music inside stopped. I heard the sound of my aunt's voice, slightly annoyed. Who on earth could that be? Footsteps approached. The door swung open. Aunt Patty stood there, a forced, polite smile on her face for whatever caroler or lost neighbor she was expecting. When she saw it was me, the smile didn't just fade, it curdled. Her entire face soured, her eyes narrowing into slits of pure, undisguised disdain. It was a look I had known my entire life. I opened my mouth to speak, to wish her a Merry Christmas, to begin the delicate process of explaining the incredible opportunity I had brought to her doorstep. "Aunt Patty, Merry Christmas. She cut me off before I could get another word out. She leaned against the doorframe, blocking my entry, and let out a long theatrical sigh. She rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. "Oh, for heaven's sake, it's you," she said, her voice a low, venomous whisper that was somehow louder than a shout. "Sophie, I simply do not have the energy for your drama tonight. I don't know why you bother. We told your mother we were keeping it small and quiet this year." She gestured vaguely back into her warm, bright house. "This is for family, the close family. We don't want any awkwardness. We don't want you here."
She looked me up and down, her eyes filled with a cold, dismissive pity. The briefcase in my hand, the one that held the salvation of her husband's company, might as well have been invisible. She didn't see a successful young woman who had orchestrated a miracle on her behalf. She saw only what she had always seen: flighty, unreliable Sophie, the family failure, begging for scraps of affection at her door. "Just go home," she said, her voice softening into a tone of faux kindness that was the cruelest cut of all. "Stop making things so difficult for everyone. It's for the best." And then she began to close the door. Slowly, deliberately. I stood there, frozen on her cold porch, watching as the sliver of light from her warm, happy home grew thinner and thinner. I saw my own defeated, heartbroken face reflected in the glass of the storm door. The sound of my family's laughter from inside was the last thing I heard before the heavy oak door began to click shut, sealing their fate inside with them. But they, in their smug, cruel certainty, had forgotten one crucial, multi-million-dollar detail. I hadn't come alone. The heavy oak door clicked shut, the sound unnaturally loud in the cold, crisp Christmas air. The cheerful wreath hanging on the front with its jaunty red bow seemed to mock me. For a long moment, I didn't move. I just stood there on the porch, a ghost at my own family's feast, the briefcase in my hand suddenly feeling as though it were filled with lead.
Through the frosted glass panels of the door, I could see the distorted, colorful blur of the Christmas tree lights and hear the muffled sound of my family's laughter. They were so close, just inches away, but they might as well have been on another planet. The warmth, the light, the belonging, it was all in there. And I was out here, in the dark and the cold, where my Aunt Patty had decided I belonged. A familiar ache, one I had carried for as long as I could remember, settled deep in my chest. It wasn't the sharp, shocking pain of a new wound. It was the dull, chronic throb of an old one, a hurt worn smooth over time by countless similar moments. As I stood there, shivering, a lifetime of being less than began to play out in my mind like a melancholy old film. I saw myself as a little girl of 7 at this very same Christmas party, in this very same house. I had proudly presented Aunt Patty with a drawing I had made for her, a colorful, childish portrait of her prize-winning roses. She had glanced at it, her lips curling into a thin, dismissive smile. "Oh, that's creative, Sophie," she had said before placing it on a side table where it was quickly buried under a pile of discarded napkins. Later that night, I'd watched her gush over my cousin Mark's gift to her, a lopsided clay ashtray he'd made at school. She had held it up for everyone to see. "Look at this! My son, the little artist!" It's then that Patty had christened me with the nickname that would follow me for years. Dreamy Sophie, the girl with her head in the clouds, while her own children were the practical go-getters. The memory shifted. I was 18, sitting at the same family's dining table, my heart pounding with nervous excitement. I had just been awarded a full scholarship to study art history at a prestigious university. When I made my announcement, my father had given me a warm, if worried, hug. But my aunt's reaction was swift and cutting. "Art history?" she had scoffed, a laugh bubbling in her throat. "Good heavens, child, what on earth will you do with that? Dust old paintings? My Mark is pre-law, and Jessica is in business school. At least they'll have real careers, make something of themselves." I remember trying to explain my passion, the way history and art were intertwined, the stories that artifacts could tell. They had all just smiled their polite, vacant smiles. I was dreamy Sophie, chasing a useless, impractical fantasy. I had swallowed my hurt and my pride, determined to prove her wrong. That was the first time I consciously sacrificed their approval to follow my own path. The film in my mind jumped forward again. I was 26, working my first real job as a research assistant at a small, underfunded city museum. I didn't make much money, but I loved my work with a fierce passion. I was helping to curate an exhibit on historical architecture. It was Thanksgiving. The entire family was gathered, and Aunt Patty, in her usual role as Master Inquisitor, had turned her attention to me. "Sophie, dear," she had said, her voice dripping with the pity that was more insulting than any insult. "Are you still volunteering at that little gallery? It's so sweet that you have a hobby you enjoy so much. Don't you worry about your future?" She had then spent the next 15 minutes lauding my cousin Jessica's recent promotion at a soulless insurance corporation. I had just smiled, taken a bite of dry turkey, and said nothing. I refused to let her diminish the work that gave my life meaning. The final memory was the most painful and the most recent. It was just 6 months ago. I had come to this house to visit my father. My aunt was out. My father, a good and gentle man who had always been quietly overshadowed by his sister's domineering personality, looked older than I had ever seen him. The stress of the family's construction company, the business his own father had started, was crushing him. He confessed to me, his voice trembling, that they were on the brink of bankruptcy. Bad investments by my uncle, Patty's husband, had left them with insurmountable debt. "I don't know what to do, Sophie," he had whispered, his eyes filled with a desperate, helpless fear. "This was my father's legacy. I'm going to lose it all." Seeing my father so broken was the catalyst for everything that followed. My love for him, my desire to see him free from this crippling stress, was the only reason I was standing on this porch tonight. I had left the museum. I had leveraged my unique background, my deep knowledge of historical architecture and urban planning from my useless degree, and landed a job as a project manager at Blackwood Properties, the most powerful real estate development firm in the state. I had worked tirelessly, distinguishing myself with a perspective no one else had, and I had caught the eye of the founder himself, Mr. Blackwood. I had spent weeks crafting the proposal that now sat heavy and useless in my briefcase. I had used my insider knowledge of my family's company, its strengths and weaknesses, and combined it with my understanding of historical building restoration. It was a brilliant, innovative plan to have Blackwood Properties acquire my family's company, absorb its debt, and rebrand it as a specialized division for historical preservation projects, with my father and uncle retained as consultants. It was a lifeline. It was a multi-million-dollar Christmas miracle. And I had done it all for them, for my father. The frigid night air snapped me back to the present. The door was still closed. The laughter inside was still audible. All those years of sacrifice, of biting my tongue, of enduring the quiet humiliations, had all been for this one chance to finally prove my worth, to save them, to earn my place as something other than dreamy Sophie. And she had, with a single contemptuous roll of her eyes, slammed the door on it. The briefcase in my hand suddenly felt different. It was no longer a peace offering. It was a weapon. The proposal inside was not just a business plan, it was a testament to my skill, my vision, my worth, everything my aunt had spent a lifetime telling me I didn't have. I came here tonight to save them from themselves, but as I stood there in the cold, a profound and liberating thought took root in my soul. Maybe I wasn't here to save them at all. Maybe, just maybe, this was the moment that would finally save me from them. The final, solid click of the latch echoed in my ears, a sound of absolute finality. I was left alone on the cold, dark porch, staring at my own distorted reflection in the glass of the storm door. The warm, inviting light of my family's Christmas celebration was now just a muffled, mocking glow behind the heavy wood. The briefcase, containing the meticulously crafted proposal that represented not just their salvation, but my own professional triumph, suddenly felt like 100-pound weight pulling my arm toward the frozen ground. For a long, heartbreaking moment, the old Sophie, the one conditioned by a lifetime of seeking their approval, took over. My hand, as if with a will of its own, began to rise. I was going to knock again. I was going to plead, to try and explain, to beg for just 5 minutes of their time. It was an instinct, a pathetic, deeply ingrained reflex to try and fix what they had broken. But then, the memory of my aunt's face flashed in my mind, the undisguised contempt, the triumphant curl of her lip as she dismissed me, and my hand froze, hovering just an inch from the door. What was I doing? I was repeating the same pattern, playing the same part in the same sad play they had been directing my entire life. I was the hopeful supplicant, and they were the cruel gatekeepers. Knocking again wouldn't change the outcome. It would only deepen my own humiliation. It would be giving her the satisfaction of rejecting me a second time. Slowly, painfully, I let my hand fall back to my side. The grief of that final, unspoken rejection was immense. It felt like a physical death, the death of a foolish, stubborn hope that one day my family would finally see me, that they would finally value me. The hope died right there on that cold welcome mat. And into that silence, a quiet, calm voice spoke from the shadows at the edge of the porch. "Sophie?" I gasped, startled. I had been so consumed by my own internal drama that I had completely forgotten I was not alone. I turned and saw the tall, imposing figure of Mr. Blackwood stepping out from behind a large, snow-dusted evergreen. He had witnessed the entire horrifying exchange. The look on his face was not one of pity, which would have shattered me. It was one of cold, sharp, analytical anger. The anger of a CEO who has just witnessed a catastrophic failure in judgment. "I am so sorry, Mr. Blackwood," I stammered, my face burning with a fresh wave of shame. To be rejected was one thing. To have him, my powerful new boss, witness it was a level of mortification I could barely comprehend. "This was a terrible mistake. I shouldn't have brought you here. We should just go." "Nonsense," he said, his voice firm, cutting through my frantic apologies. He walked to stand beside me, looking not at me, but at the closed door. "Do not apologize for the rudeness of others, Sophie. That was not a simple misunderstanding. That was a deliberate, calculated act of disrespect. In my world, in the world of business we now both inhabit, an act like that is not just poor manners, it's a signal. It signals weakness, insecurity, and a profound lack of strategic foresight." He looked down at the briefcase in my hand. "You came here tonight, Sophie, with a generous, well-conceived lifeline. You offered them a partnership, an opportunity to save themselves, presented by one of my own valued team members. And that woman," he nodded towards the door, "in an act of petty, personal spite, just slammed the door not only on you, but on a multi-million-dollar deal that would have secured her own husband's future." His words, so clinical and direct, were like a splash of ice water. He was reframing my personal humiliation as a colossal business error on their part. "I came here tonight, Sophie, because I believe in your plan. More importantly, I believe in your ability to execute it. But I have one inviolable rule in business. I do not partner with fools, and I do not reward insolence. That woman's behavior was not just unkind. It was unprofessional to a degree that I find staggering." He paused, letting his words sink in. "The decision, however, is yours. We can turn around right now, get in my car, and this proposal, this entire opportunity, dies on this porch tonight. They will never even know how close they came to salvation. Or," he said, a dangerous glint in his eye, "we can ensure that your aunt and your entire family understands the precise nature of the opportunity she just threw away with both hands." I looked at him, at his powerful, confident face, and I felt my own spine straightening. He wasn't telling me what to do. He was showing me what a person with power does. They don't absorb disrespect. They address it. They don't retreat from a bad deal. They demonstrate why it was a bad deal for the other party. He was offering me a choice, not just about this one night, but about who I was going to be from this moment forward. Was I going to be dreamy Sophie, the family scapegoat who retreats when hurt? Or was I going to be Sophie, the project manager at Blackwood Properties, a woman who handles business? I looked at the closed door one last time. My father was in there, oblivious. My aunt was in there, smug and triumphant. I thought of my grandmother's lopsided ashtray, displayed with more pride than any of my own achievements. The choice was so simple, so clear. The sacrifice was over. I met Mr. Blackwood's gaze, my own eyes now clear and hard. "You're right," I said, my voice steady for the first time that night. "She needs to understand." A slow, satisfied smile touched Mr. Blackwood's lips. "Good," he said simply. He then stepped forward, past me, directly to the center of the door. He did not ring the bell. Instead, he reached up and took hold of the heavy brass eagle head knocker. He raised it and brought it down, once, twice, 3 times. The sound was not the cheerful chime of a doorbell. It was a deep, resonant, and authoritative boom, boom, boom that echoed in the cold night air. It was a sound that did not request entry, but demanded it. Inside the house, I heard the music stop abruptly. The murmur of conversation died. We stood there together on the porch, a united front, waiting in the sudden, absolute silence. We were no longer waiting for them to let us in. We were waiting for them to face the consequences that were knocking at their door. The deep, authoritative boom of the brass knocker echoed 3 times, a sound that seemed to shake the very foundation of the porch. It was not a request. It was a summons. Inside the house, the cheerful Christmas music stopped abruptly. The murmur of conversation died. There was a beat of shocked silence, and then I heard the sound of my Aunt Patty's furious, hurried footsteps approaching the door. The door was not opened gently this time. It was thrown open, and my aunt stood there, her face a thunderous mask of pure irritation, her body coiled like a snake, ready to strike at whatever stranger had dared to disturb her perfect Christmas party with such aggression. "What on earth do you think you're—" she began to yell, her eyes fixed on a point just past my shoulder. And then her words died in her throat. Her eyes finally focused, and she saw him. She saw the man standing beside me, the man who had knocked on her door. The transformation was instantaneous and total. It was as if she had been struck by lightning. The anger on her face did not just fade, it shattered, replaced with the look of wide-eyed, slack-jawed, utter disbelief. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her skin a pasty, unhealthy gray beneath her festive makeup. Her jaw worked silently, but no sound came out. She knew exactly who he was. Everyone in this state knew Marcus Blackwood. His face was a fixture in the business journals she so proudly left on her coffee table. His name was a constant presence in the society pages she so desperately wished to be a part of. He was a titan, a local legend, the very embodiment of the power and status she worshipped. And he was standing on her porch, on Christmas, next to me. I watched her mind race, her eyes darting frantically between my face and his, trying to compute an equation that made no sense. The two worlds she had kept so neatly separated in her head, the world of her insignificant, dreamy niece and the world of powerful, important men like Mr. Blackwood, had just collided with catastrophic force right on her doorstep. Mr. Blackwood, what an honor! What are you possibly doing here?" She completely ignored me now, her entire being focused on the powerful man before her, a desperate, fawning energy radiating from her as she tried to salvage the situation.
Mr. Blackwood did not return her flustered greeting. He did not smile. He looked down at her from his considerable height with an expression of such cold, profound disappointment that it made even me flinch. "Good evening, Patricia," he said, his voice quiet, calm, and as sharp as a shard of ice. His use of her full name was a deliberate, formal dismissal of any familiarity she might have hoped for. I believe we were just leaving. He then looked pointedly at me, standing beside him, and then his gaze returned to my aunt's horrified face. "I was here tonight, on Christmas, as a personal guest of my newest, and I must say, my most promising new project manager," he said, and then he gestured with a small, respectful inclination of his head towards me, "Miss Sophie Wallace." I saw another jolt of shock run through my aunt as she processed this new information. Me, a project manager, for him.
Miss Wallace, Mr. Blackwood continued, his voice a relentless clinical dissection of my aunt's failure, has been working tirelessly on a proposal for an investment partnership. A lifeline, I believe, is the term she used. A multi-million-dollar deal to acquire and save your family's struggling construction company from its impending, and I assure you, very certain bankruptcy. At the mention of the company, I saw my father and my uncle appear in the hallway behind my aunt, their faces curious and concerned. My father's eyes lit up with a flicker of hope when he saw Mr. Blackwood. Sophie has spoken very highly of her family, Mr. Blackwood went on, his cold gaze never leaving my aunt's face. Of her father's legacy. She has a brilliant vision for preserving that legacy. She convinced me, against my own better judgment and the advice of my financial team, to consider this deal. She even convinced me, he said, his voice dripping with irony, to come here tonight, to this dinner, to meet you all personally before we finalize the agreement next week. She thought a personal touch was important. She believed in you. He let that final, devastating sentence hang in the air for a long moment. Then he delivered the final blow. However, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, though it carried with more weight than any shout, a few moments ago you informed my project manager, your niece, that she was not welcome here. You told her to go home. You closed this door in her face. He shook his head slowly, a look of genuine disgust on his face. I must say, Patricia, in my 30 years in business, I have never witnessed such a stunning, self-defeating lack of courtesy, professionalism, and basic human decency. You have not only insulted a member of my team, you have insulted me. And you have insulted the memory of your own father, whose legacy this young woman was trying to save. So, he concluded, his voice now flat and final, I will respect your wishes. We will go home. The proposal, the partnership, the multi-million-dollar lifeline, consider it permanently withdrawn. You have my sincerest condolences for your family's financial future. Good evening. Aunt Patty made a small, strangled sound, like a wounded animal. She physically stumbled back a step, her hand flying to her mouth. I could see my father behind her now, his face ashen, finally understanding the full, catastrophic scope of what her sister had just done. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a desperate, pleading anguish. I just gave him a small, sad shake of my head. I tried, Dad. I really, truly tried. Mr. Blackwood turned his back on the scene of devastation. He gently placed a hand on the small of my back and began to guide me down the porch steps, away from the wreckage. Come, Sophie, he said, his voice now gentle, meant only for me. You don't belong here. We walked away into the cold Christmas night, leaving my entire family standing in the open doorway, frozen in a tableau of absolute horror and irreversible regret. The warm, cheerful light from their home spilled out onto the snow, illuminating nothing but the ruin of their own making. We walked away from the house into the cold, silent embrace of the Christmas night. Each step I took away from that porch felt like I was shedding a heavy, invisible skin I had been wearing my entire life. The brief, brutal confrontation had been painful, but the feeling that was now washing over me was not one of sadness. It was one of pure, crystalline, and terrifying freedom. In the warm, quiet interior of his Bentley, Mr. Blackwood didn't immediately start the car. He turned to me, his expression serious, the earlier anger replaced by the calm, appraising look of a mentor. Sophie, he said, his voice calm but firm. Let this be the first and most important lesson you learn while working with me. Never ever try to save people who are determined to drown. You can throw them a lifeline, but you cannot force them to take it, and you must never ever let them pull you under with them. He paused, his gaze intense. That woman's smallness, her jealousy, that is her prison, not yours. Don't ever let anyone else's limitations define the boundaries of your own world. Do you understand? I looked at this powerful man who had only known me for a few months, yet who saw my worth more clearly than the family I had known my entire life. Tears pricked at my eyes, but they were not tears of hurt. They were tears of overwhelming gratitude. "Yes, sir," I whispered. "I understand." "Good," he said with a decisive nod. "Now, I believe I promised you dinner. My reservation at the Clove Club is for 9. Their chef is a genius. I think you'll appreciate his artistry." The dinner was surreal. We sat at the best table in the city's most exclusive restaurant, discussing the future of architectural design and the logistics of a new downtown project he was considering me to lead. He treated me not as a junior employee, but as a respected colleague, an equal. Hours earlier, I had been deemed unworthy to enter my aunt's house. Now I was brainstorming a billion-dollar project with a titan of industry. The contrast was so stark, so absolute, it felt like I had been reborn into a new life. The inevitable phone calls began the next morning. The first was from my father. His voice was a broken, desperate whisper. "Sophie, honey, I am so sorry. I had no idea. Patty, she told me you weren't coming. I didn't know you were at the door. I didn't know you had brought Mr. Blackwood." He was rambling, his words tumbling over each other. "Is there anything you can do? Can you call him? Can you explain? Your uncle and I, we are going to lose everything."
The old Sophie would have been consumed by guilt, but as I listened to him, I felt a sad, weary clarity. "Dad," I said gently but firmly, "I can't. I'm sorry." I brought him to the door. I gave Aunt Patty a choice. She made it. This isn't about me or misunderstanding anymore. He saw her character and he made a business decision. There's nothing I can do to change that. I was finally setting a boundary, not just with my aunt, but with my father's passive acceptance of her behavior. The calls from my aunt and uncle were less civil. They were a torrent of blame, of rage, of accusations. They called me a traitor, a vengeful monster who had deliberately ruined them. I listened to one voicemail from my aunt where she screamed that I had always been jealous of her family. I didn't feel anger. I just felt nothing. I deleted the messages and blocked their numbers. As predicted, a few weeks later, the bank foreclosed on the construction company's assets. It was sold for pennies on the dollar in a bankruptcy auction. My father and uncle were forced into an early and not very prosperous retirement. Aunt Patty, I heard through the family grapevine, had to sell her beloved house to cover their debts. Her social standing, the thing she valued above all else, evaporated overnight. The family fractured, torn apart by recriminations and blame, with my aunt's actions on Christmas night at the epicenter of their ruin. It's been a year since that night. I am now the head of the Historical Preservation and Urban Renewal Division at Blackwood Properties. The project Mr. Blackwood and I discussed that Christmas night is now a soaring success, a beautiful fusion of modern design and historical respect that has won numerous architectural awards. He has become more than a boss. He is my mentor and my friend. I saw my father a few months ago. I was grabbing a coffee downtown, and he was sitting alone at a small table. He looked older, sadder, but the desperate fear in his eyes was gone. Our conversation was awkward but polite. He asked about my work, not with the old, dismissive tone, but with a new, genuine interest. He finally saw me not as dreamy Sophie, but as the capable woman I had become. It was a start. Sometimes I think about that closed door on Christmas night. I spent so much of my life trying to get that door to open, trying to earn a place at a table where I was never truly wanted. My aunt's final cruel rejection felt like the end of the world,
But it wasn't. It was a liberation. My vindication wasn't in their failure. It was in my success. My revenge wasn't watching their world burn. It was in building my own beautiful, strong, and brilliant world from the ashes of their disrespect. They thought they were slamming a door in my face, but all they really did was finally set me free. An incredible story about how sometimes a closed door is really an open road to a better future. What do you think of the way Sophie handled her aunt? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing your perspective. If you enjoyed this powerful story of vindication, please show your support by hitting that like button and be sure to subscribe for more daily stories of karma and satisfying revenge. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.